Donkey Kong is Nintendo's single most important franchise. Now that's not to say that it's the most iconic, critically acclaimed, or profitable. Those titles probably belong to Mario, Zelda, and Pokemon. However, the fact of the matter is that these franchises simply wouldn't exist without Donkey Kong. The 1981 arcade game was Nintendo's first big hit as a video game maker, and it would spawn their first franchise as well. A franchise that would fade from the limelight, unfortunately, due to the video game crash of '83. Though the Donkey Kong games would see a release on NES, they paled in comparison to the rising star that was DK's one-time nemesis, Mario. It wouldn't be until 1994 with the release of Donkey Kong Country that DK re-established itself as a franchise, leading to the character's most prolific era. Sadly, when Nintendo parted ways with Rareware, DK was left without a shepherd and was mostly relegated to a handful of experimental titles. Even when Retro Studios took the reins for the series and gave us the critically acclaimed Donkey Kong Country Returns and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, the success ended up being short-lived due to some disappointing sales overall. As a result, there hasn't been another Donkey Kong game since 2014. Even with all that in mind, I'm only scratching the surface of why there was so much hype behind Donkey Kong Bananza when it was announced earlier this year. It was the first game in the series in over a decade. It was the first 3D game in the series since 1999's Donkey Kong 64. It's the first time the series has undergone a stylistic change since 1994's Donkey Kong Country, and it was the first high-profile release for the Nintendo Switch 2 since its launch. Needless to say, a lot of eyes were on Donkey Kong Bananza, and to say it met expectations would be an understatement. Donkey Kong Bananza is a great game and one of the finest 3D platformers I have played in a long time. In Bananza, we find DK out on the Ingot Islands working with a digging crew so that he can get the golden bananas that have been discovered there. DK's happy digging, however, is interrupted by the arrival of the Void Excavation Company, who start digging right on top of the whole observation, dragging it and DK down to the depths of the planet. To the shock of everyone, it is discovered that there are whole worlds beneath the surface of the planet full of life and culture. As DK explores, he meets a young girl named Pauline, who was taken down into the depths by the Void Company to help them reach the planet's core. There supposedly lies a treasure at the center of the Earth that will grant the wish of anyone who finds it. Unable to go up, Pauline's only choice is to go further down and use the core's wish to get herself back to the surface. She has to hurry though because the head of the Void Company, Voidcom, plans on taking the core for himself. Luckily, Pauline's quest aligns with that of DK's, who is going deeper in search of more bananas, so the two decide to team up to get Pauline home. I was not expecting the story in Bananza to be as good as it was. I figured it would just default to the old chestnut, someone has stolen DK's bananas and now they must die. Instead, what we have here is a simple yet compelling story with great characters, excellent pacing, and some strong thematic content. The big theme of the game here seems to be the concept of dreams, and what makes a dream pure versus one that, as the game puts it, is rotten. We see this mostly in the dichotomy between our three main characters. Pauline's dream represents one that is pure as she simply wants to return to the surface so that she can pursue a music career. Not for the purposes of fame or fortune, but because music brings her joy and she wants to share that joy with the world around her. Void's dream, on the other hand, represents a more rotten dream as he simply wants the core to further consolidate power. Power that he clearly already has enough of, but the fact that he wants more indicates that no matter how much power he gets, it will never be enough. He's even willing to use people like Pauline as pawns in his schemes, attempting to taint their pure dreams with his rotten one. And then we have DK, who is a unique presence amongst these two. Whereas Void and Pauline both have goals and ambition, DK does not. He has everything he wants and is too powerful to care what people like Void think. He does, however, have a kind heart, which is why he allies himself with Pauline rather than Void, and it's through Pauline's interactions with DK that she realizes the purity of her dream, as her voice allows her to grant DK even greater power and free those oppressed by Void. It's just like how a working man suffocating in the American industrial complex can find joy in their life through their favorite song. It's very smart, very subtle, and serviced through the gameplay rather than extensive cutscenes. It's a fine piece of video game storytelling. The characters are fantastic as well. What I find interesting about DK in this game is that he actually gets to play a more heroic role this time. If you really think about DK's previous video game appearances, he is almost never portrayed as a hero. Now, it's not to say that he is never the protagonist, but most of the time he goes after his enemies because of a transgression against him, typically the theft of his banana hoard. Here, DK is actively stand against villains primarily to help someone in trouble. Now, it's not to say that DK doesn't have his own goals in this game, but he very clearly cares about Pauline, and by the end of the game, he's on board with giving up his own desires to stay with Pauline as she pursues her music career. It also helps that DK is just such a lovable character, not so much the stubborn gorilla that we know from back in the day, but more a bit doofus with a heart of gold. I love it. This is also the first time Pauline has ever gotten some character, which is crazy considering she appeared in the very first Donkey Kong game. And I really like how she is portrayed here. In Pauline's various cameo appearances, she has always projected a lot of confidence, but here we have a younger depiction of the character who is dealing with a lot of insecurities. Despite having clear talent as a performer, Pauline is nervous about singing as well as her own capabilities in general, something that DK helps her overcome through his own strength and confidence, something that Pauline herself develops as the game goes on, but primarily due to the presence of DK. You really get the sense that she'd probably be at a loss if DK were to suddenly leave, which puts Pauline in something of a moral dilemma. Once all this is said and done, will she insist DK stay, or will she let him go? And the conclusion she comes to is rather touching. I love this depiction of Pauline, and I hope that she continues to appear in later games. The villain is great too. Void Kong is very much what you would expect of an evil businessman type character. Very loud, very flamboyant in his manner of dress, selfish, rude, and ruthless in how he treats everyone else around him. Despite all this, however, Void Kong always comes off as a little pathetic. Despite all his posturing of power and wealth, he himself is weak and is reliant on the help of others to succeed. You see this mostly in how he stands no chance against DK whenever they fight. His two underlings, Grumpy Kong and Poppy Kong, are also a good representation of this, as both are far stronger and more capable than Void Kong, and when Void Kong stops serving their best interests, they are very quick to turn on him, even joining DK to some degree. There's also a surprise reveal villain at the end of the game, but I won't dare spoil it. All I'm going to say is that if you didn't like the Tikis or Snowmads from Retro Studios games, you'll be happy to see what happens here. The plot of Bananza is way better than it has any right to be. Though the narrative is deceptively simple, there is so much thematic depth and characterization that it ends up becoming something special. One of Nintendo's best efforts as far as storytelling goes. The graphics in Bananza are stellar by all accounts. On a technical level, the game does a great job showing what the Nintendo Switch 2 is capable of. The levels are big, open, and detailed, and are remarkably destructive too. As a matter of fact, I can't think of another game that makes more extensive use of the destructible elements. While it is true that each level has a skeleton of sorts that can't be destroyed, I'd say between 25 and 50% of the levels can be smashed to bits, all without sacrificing performance either, as Bananza runs at a pretty consistent frame rate. Though I did notice a few instances where the frame rate would stutter for a few moments, these instances can't be counted on one hand. It really makes me excited for what comes next on the Switch 2 because this thing is rocking that power. One thing that a lot of people have expressed concern about is the new stylistic change. Bananza breaks with the art style that has been used since Donkey Kong Country, mostly in regards to DK's appearance, but I would say the new art style is pretty damn good. All the characters look great, they are super expressive and expertly animated as well. The level themes are also fun, creatively designed, constantly throwing new and interesting ideas at you. The game never misses an opportunity to throw you a curveball. It also helps that while the game is still doing its own thing, it hasn't forgotten the past either, with plenty of references to past games, be it the appearances of DK's old friends or throwback levels. Obviously, music is a big theme in this game, so you know the soundtrack rocks. The game maintains that jazzy jungle beat that the series is known for, but also throws in some more contemporary jazz as well, most of which feature vocals from Pauline, and they are all wonderful. This is probably a good time to mention that while most of the characters speak in Banjo-Kazooie style gibberish, Pauline is actually fully voiced, and she sounds fantastic.
Did you feel that rumbling? The thunder down here is intense. Wait, was that your stomach? Yeesh, don't scare me like that.
She's voiced by Jenny Kidd, who just does an amazing job. Kinda makes me wish that everyone in the game had a voice. You know what would have been funny? If they got Richard Yearwood to voice DK.
I'd shower you with coconut cream pie.
Actually, maybe it's for the best that didn't happen. The sound effects. Awesome! It feels so good to smash stuff to bits in this game and lay the smack down on enemies. It makes the game so much fun to play, which is exactly what you want in a Donkey Kong game. The presentation here is stellar by all accounts. Great graphics, great art, great sound design. I couldn't say a bad thing about the presentation even if I tried. When Bananza was first unveiled, people instantly compared it to Mario Odyssey, Nintendo even going as far as to refer to it as a spiritual successor. However, as I started playing Bananza, I was surprised to find that it was a completely different game by all accounts. For starters, the game is not a collectathon platformer. The game is instead a point A to point B affair that makes it very clear where you need to go and what you need to do. I actually really like this because it makes for a very strong and well-paced game. People often get hung up on freedom of choice and all that stuff in gaming, but sometimes it's nice to just have a clear idea of what you need to do and where you need to go, and that is the case here. Now, it's not to say that exploration still isn't a key component here. There is a purpose to finding all the various collectibles in the game, but it's never for the sake of progression outside a few instances where you need to cough up some gold in order to proceed. However, you'd have to actively be trying to avoid collecting it as to not have enough to move on. Pacing is very important to me, and Bananza has incredible pacing, and that's primarily because it is not a collectathon platformer. As I said though, there is significance to exploring and finding collectibles. The most important ones are the golden bananas, which one might think are the equivalent of power stars, but instead they're more like XP points. Once you have gathered a full bushel of bananas, DK will gain an experience point that he can then spend to upgrade his abilities. These upgrades range from making his punches more powerful to unlocking new abilities, and while nothing is necessary to complete the game, unlocking all of this will make the experience more comfortable. You'll probably find yourself gathering a good chunk of bananas as you play the game anyway, as there are plenty placed along the path you follow through the main game. Where Bananza really shares DNA with 3D Mario games though is in regards to how it handles DK's moveset. Like a Mario game, DK has a pretty complex moveset that is easy to understand yet difficult to master. For starters, he can punch forward, down, and up, which is primarily designed for the digging system. You can punch your way through walls, the ground below you, and the ceiling above you, allowing you to tunnel through the world around you. This can be used, of course, to find hidden goodies, but with careful observation, it can be used to bypass certain hazards. DK can also rip huge chunks out of the ground and use them in a variety of different ways. He can swing the chunks for melee attacks, he can toss them at enemies, use them as a springboard to double jump, and even ride them like a surfboard across the ground. There is so much DK can do in this game, and it's rewarding to experiment with his abilities in order to conquer the game's challenges. His moveset is further enhanced by the Bananza transformations. Over the course of the game, DK and Pauline will meet the various elders of the depths who will teach Pauline songs that will allow her to transform DK into a variety of different forms, each with their own abilities. At first, these are limited to basic stuff like stronger punches, faster movement speed, and the ability to hover for a brief period of time, but later transformations get a little more interesting, such as having the ability to slow down time briefly, or suck up the surroundings and then shoot them back out. Just like DK's basic moveset, there's a lot of experimentation to be done with all these abilities, yet the game doesn't lean on them either. I thought the game was going to constantly need you to transform, but I found you could play through most of the game in DK's base form. Really, the transformations are just there if you want to try a different approach, which is great. I'm probably making Bananza out to be some kind of flawless masterpiece, but that isn't really the case. The main thing that annoyed me were the controls, and that's not to say that they are bad. The controls in Bananza are pretty damn good, but they can be finicky at times. For example, despite having a dedicated button for punching the ground, you often make a hole beneath you with just a basic forward punch, which can really screw up your positioning. The same thing can happen due to DK's habit of vaulting over any geometry that is just above eye level. Climbing walls is especially awkward, as the camera has to be in a very specific position in order for it to work. Otherwise, you aren't going to be moving in the direction you want, or worse, jump off the wall when you don't want to. Some of the default control options can be a tad frustrating too in a pinch, such as being able to cycle through the Bananza transformations by clicking the analog sticks. Thankfully, stuff like that can be turned off, so it isn't that much of a pain. None of these annoyances are completely detrimental to the gameplay, mind you, but they are still annoyances. Ones that probably would have been ironed out with just one more coat of polish, but the rest of the game is so finely polished that I'm willing to forgive it. Some annoyances with the controls aside, Bananza is still loads of fun. It's just an inventive and enjoyable 3D platformer. In fact, it's one of the best I've played in a long time. Bananza is a pretty comfortable experience in regards to difficulty. The main game never gave me much trouble, but at the same time I never felt that it was making things too easy either. I still had to think creatively from time to time, which I think was what the game was going for. If one approach wasn't working, there was typically something else in my bag of tricks that I could call upon in order to conquer whatever challenge I was facing at the time. Don't worry though, the game will still challenge you with its post-game content, so there is still something for the veterans who enjoyed the challenge of the Donkey Kong Country series. And if the game is too difficult for you, the game features an assist mode to make things easier. This is a game that is definitely accessible to just about everyone in regards to its difficulty. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not Nintendo was justified in jacking up their prices, but considering what is happening in Washington right now, I think it's justified.
Hey, relax, guy.
Plus, I think Nintendo did a pretty good job packing Bananza full of content. The main game took me about 15 hours to get through, and there was still plenty to do once I reached the core. Honestly, I'm still picking through the post-game stuff and having a blast. I'd wager you could get upwards of 30 or so hours out of this game, and even then, I think there's a chance you could get more. So yeah, I think Bananza is worth its asking price. I had high expectations for Donkey Kong Bananza, and I'm so happy to report that the game met every single one of them. The story is surprisingly strong, the graphics are stellar on both the technical and artistic level, the music and general sound design is outstanding, and it is full to bursting with depth and content, while also being easy enough to understand. It has been a long time since I have played a game this good, and it makes me really excited to see what comes next for the Nintendo Switch 2. If you haven't had a chance to play this game yet, be sure to pick up a copy, because if the year ended tomorrow, this would for sure be my game of the year.